Oops. Are you guys, it's 8 a.m. Are you good to go, Janelle? Okay. Okay, it's 8 a.m. I'll call the meeting of the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District to order. Today is the 11th of April. Do we have anybody any commissioner, is Commissioner Rummel participating via Zoom, or? He is not, okay. So we do have a quorum. I don't know that we need to do a roll call because call to order. Welcome our guests that may be virtual or in the room. Michael, you have any announcements?
No announcements.
Okay. Are there any appearances by the public? Any appearances by the public? And any appearances by the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. We have several items. We've got the approval of the 28th meeting minutes from March, cash statement, capital fund, expedited boundary annexation, Northern Interstate Corridor, Village of DeForest, review and approval of sanitary extension plans, of which there's several, approval of first quarter 2024 sewer service charges, acceptance of work for the Nine Springs Wastewater Treatment Plant Maintenance Facility rooftop solar expansion, approved transaction amount Metro Grow toolbar purchase, and accepting first quarter 2024 focus item report. Do we have any questions on any of the items before we get a motion? Sarah?
There we go, get myself in order. Can we pull the focus items report from the consent agenda? I have a couple questions on it. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll pull H, move it to topics, and we'll move on from through 3A through 3G. Do we have a motion approving 3A through 3G?
Wilson, I'll move approval of those items.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by Commissioner, second by Commissioner Esther. Greg was trying to find his button. Okay, motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by Commissioner Estrich to approve the consent calendar items 3A through 3G. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. Okay, then we'll go back to 3H. Sarah?
I forgot to turn on my computer for my person to remote in this morning, so I'm frantically texting my husband, can you turn on that computer next to my desk? Okay, sorry, you can do that. The question I had a couple questions. Thanks for I still really love the focus items report card. It's so helpful. But there are a couple on here that I felt like perhaps need to move from green to yellow status. Particularly the greenhouse gas reduction plan says it's being delayed due to ED transition. And then there was one other one that I felt like, and the ongoing commission process improvement. Not sure what the kind of criteria is that you all decide on when things need to be moved to yellow, but it just seems to me that those are things that we're watching or delaying right now, and I want us to be fair to say they're probably not on track as we thought they would be, but they, the second one, the ongoing commission process improvement, was the other thing that, at least for me, seemed like it was more yellow than green. Just I guess a piece of feedback, and if there's any comments or kind of status that you think would be helpful to talk us through on those things, Michael or Jeff, I'm interested, but that was my feedback on those.
I think that's fair feedback. I think our idea with the greenhouse gas reduction plan is we wanted to deliver that plan this year. So from that perspective, looking at kind of the year, we don't have any concerns with it being delayed. So that's why it's on the green front. And with the governance coach, it was green until about 2 weeks ago. So that should probably go to yellow.
Helpful to know that the greenhouse gas plan is still expected this year, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so anybody else have anything? If not, do we have a motion?
Yeah, it's Wilson. What did we decide to do there? Are we changing one of them to yellow?
We're changing greenhouse gas and ongoing commissioners process improvement to yellow.
Okay, just the one.
Yep, the two of them.
Or both of them?
Yep. Correct? Sarah?
Okay, now it will. Based on Michael's comment that we're still gonna get it by the end of the year, I'm fine keeping that green. If staff says, hey, look, no, this is still on track, it's delayed from where we thought it would be. Again, I don't have a strong definition of the criteria. I defer to you all. I just wanted to ask the question about it.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the focus item report card, moving the ongoing commission process from green to yellow?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner Eskridge, second by
I'll second that, Tom.
Second by Commissioner Clark. Any further comments or discussion? Thanks for the clarification. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? None, motion carries. Thank you. So the next topic, I will lead off. It's the Executive Director recruitment process. And I put kind of a matrix together that was in your packet. I think, there's two options that we can do. I've had some discussions with, Michael regarding this, and he's used a search group hire for 3 positions that he hired under him. And they could do a lot of what's in 2 through 5, or 2 through 4 rather. 5 is the final selection by the commission. They could probably help us just how we run that process. But so the first task, I think, even if we do get a search group, is to have, staff collate other position descriptions and then have I'm thinking a subcommittee, or unless you want the full commission to review the job description and then possibly have it regraded, and then, see how that, we do that at the same time. Maybe we're hiring a search committee. But I don't know if it's gonna be a lot of work, because if we continue with the same organizational structure we have, we just went through that process a few months ago, right? We have Michael's and the 2 executive, Bill's and Eric's, job descriptions. So that may not be a lot of work. And then I'm also thinking that committee, if we do go the route of hiring a search firm, that committee, we would ask the HR department to do the draft of the RFP. And then I would suggest that maybe that committee would review the request for proposal, and then potentially, instead of the whole commission, if it's your desire to do this firm, recommend the firm to the whole commission to, that would be selected by the whole commission. Or we could have the, interviews done by the whole commission, or firm review and selection. But I think a subcommittee is a little better in that route. And then, depending on how we write the RFP, then they could help do what is point number 2, where they reach out to a cross-section of current staff and kind of get their needs and desires, needs analysis type thing. They would handle the logistics, and they would do the search process, public search, and they would also look to probably try to recruit people, as happened for the 3 positions that Michael hired. So that's one thing. And I'm thinking, when we did the hire in 2010 for Michael, Ezra and I were on the commission at that time, and it was pretty much a commission-led process. We did have assistance from an HR person at Dane County who did some of the logistic work for us, but we had a professional panel kind of help narrow down the candidates, and then the commission did reviews and then final interview selection. But I think that and the more I thought about it, the more I thought a search committee or recruiter is probably the better way to go, particularly when you have 9 members on the commission, and it kind of focuses it, and also gives that kind of extra layer between us and the hires, or the applicants. The other thing then is what I have under related activities is to complete, and I don't know if we do this with another subcommittee or the same subcommittee. I was thinking potentially another one, would do the executive director performance review process, kind of come up with that, because I'm thinking when we hire a new executive director, they're probably gonna wonder, you know, what are the expectations, and what is the review process? And then, that then gets to the review of policy governance too, because so much of the executive director's capabilities and expectations are really set out in the policy governance section. So we should probably have some people go through that and see if we want to add, subtract, amend, or whatever, given the change. Now, you know, we've had to change the structure since they were last looked at, and I think it's just a timely thing to do. So I guess I'd open it up to see what commission's thoughts are. So I'm thinking, as I said, I'm thinking more and more that we'd have a subcommittee that would go through the job description, and then help with the RFP, and then make a recommendation on a firm to the commission. And then we would have a second subcommittee do that, what's called the related activities. And then, I don't know if we may need a touch point for the, if we hire a search firm, they may need a touch point to contact in, you know, if they have any questions or anything. Hide that too. And maybe they don't, I don't know. I've never been involved in, they do need a touch point. I've never been involved in the process with the hiring person, but I think having a touch point cited would be good, and we could do that, you know, a little later when we hire the firm. So I'd be interested to hear what commission members have thoughts, because I'd like to, particularly if we're doing a search firm, it's gonna take a little, well, even us doing it ourselves might take longer, but it's gonna, because we have to do the RFP process, that's gonna be probably a few month process. And, so that you know, I'm thinking it's probably several months before we get a new hire on board. Tom?
So I like the ideas that you've suggested so far about going through the RFP and hiring, somebody, a contractor, to help us out, with recruitment and analyzing the different, people that come in. I think that's a great idea. And then a recommendation at some point. Now, the only thing that I'm thinking about is that second group you were talking about, that maybe makes recommendations on who we're interviewing, or makes recommendations on who they think we should hire. It seems like we're missing up somewhere. And that group, so I've seen this done in many different situations from a municipal administrator perspective. And a lot of times what communities do is they have a second group that like meets with these administrators. They end up pulling people, and I'm going to give you an example. When Wanakee hired an administrator, which was many, many years ago, they actually had me on the committee, and it was more as someone from a community that worked with Wanakee. And we have all these wonderful customer communities that have great administrators. Not that any of them are on the call right now, right? But you know, is that a possibility to think about, that in that group maybe we have some of those folks who are our customers, you know, sit to at least see who the people are, or sit through interviews and see how they are. Just throwing it out there to see what people think.
I don't disagree with that. That's when we hired Michael, we had a professional panel of other engineers, I think. Green Bay, yeah. So, we had that, but I think that was kind of maybe something that the first subcommittee would try to decide is when they draft the RFP, what process? Because I was thinking, you know, a lot of times what's been big now are meet and greets, right? When they hired a library director in Fitchburg, they had last three candidates do a meet and greet with different constituent groups. And I think the city administrator, they did that too. So that, you know, or we could go where you have a professional panel or a combination professional community people do some of the interviews too before it comes to the commission. What I want to know is, what I think a critical point, and maybe the firm can help us, is we have a 9-member commission. And if everyone wants to interview, I wouldn't want to, if you don't want to interview, that's fine, but if everybody wants to do an interview, how do we handle it? Because it seems like 9 people in a room to 1 is kind of overbearing in my mind. So I don't know if we break up into 2 groups, because I don't want to be as select, if somebody wants to be in it, I don't want you not to be in it. You know what I mean? So that's, I think maybe the subcommittee, we could do that, and working with the consultant that's chosen is the best method to handle it if everybody on the commission wants to do the interviews of the candidates. If we have like 4 people or 5 people on the commission that want to do the interviews, the others don't, well, that's fine too. But I'm thinking I want to give everybody on the commission the opportunity to be in on the interview, at least the final interviews. Cheryl?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for putting the work in to put this together, Tom. Really appreciate it. I have a bunch of feedback and questions, but before I dive into that, I'm curious, our HR director's sitting in the room. I'm sure you've had some conversations. Would it be fair, Mike, to ask you to kind of reflect on anything like from your perspective, best practice, things we should be considering? I would love to have some additional feedback before we dive too much into our conversation, if that would be appropriate. To put you on the spot, Mike. Thank you.
Sure. What's outlined here is what I would recommend as far as, commission, review the job description. Your hire, this is your position. It's your responsibility to make sure that job description is what you want for the new person. But then I would strongly encourage as well using a search firm for this, because, executive search firms, they know how to do it. They know how to source candidates. I can throw a job announcement out on our website, and, I don't have the time or the resources to make phone calls, cold call people and say, hey, are you interested in this, or do you know people who might be, where, that's what the search firms are for. So, I agree with this approach. I think working with a search firm is the way to go to make sure that you get the best candidates.
Just to follow up, it does seem to be this move, and you noted it, Tom, about, how do we, recognizing our role with the public and the community, to integrate community feedback or like that sort of, whether it be a meet and greet once you've gotten to candidates, or whether it be earlier in the process of what should the position description look like? Because the one piece of feedback I had, or one of my pieces of feedback, was maybe flipping task 1 and 2 as you have them articulated here, Tom, so that we could put that feedback on district priorities into the job description. But it would seem like that might be a place where we would want to ask the, Milwaukee Met or Green Bay or our owner communities, what is it that you see that's most important in this role? But just wondering, if you have any thoughts on kind of that integration of community and owner feedback and processes like this.
I mean, again, there's a couple of different ways to do that. You could do focus groups. You all as a commission have the constituents that you represent, so, you could reach out to your relative constituencies and get that kind of feedback as part of the process of reviewing the job description. But, yeah, I mean, there's definitely ways to integrate that and to make sure that, what you're trying to hire is what customer communities expect out of this position.
Yeah, so make sure, I'm just thinking like these are all things we're going to want to capture in our RFP presumably, which hopefully we'd be working with you on for the executive search firm to help us coordinate. Yeah, okay, super helpful. Anyone else have questions for Mike? Otherwise, I'm happy to provide my other feedback now or turn the table over.
I actually have a question for Mike. This is Bill Walker, Deputy Executive Director. I'm actually giving you an opportunity to expand on something, on the importance of the job description and getting good feedback in the design of that. To me, that is a very high leverage point. Would you expand on that?
Sure. I mean, I always, encourage supervisors and managers, and in this case, commission, you're the supervisor manager of this position, that, you know, whenever there's a vacancy, to take that opportunity, look at that job description, and make sure that that job description is outlining the priorities and the work that you want that position to do. So, you know, I think there was conversation a minute ago about expectations and the executive director review process. Well, the position description is the first step of that. You know, if you're not outlining in the job description what that job is and what you're expecting that position to do, it's very hard to set those expectations. So taking the opportunity now, reviewing that job description, outlining those priorities. You know, a search firm is going to do one of those brochure thingies where it's going to say, all right, here's what the job is, but here are the priorities in the next, you know, 1, 3, 5 years, and really giving thought to what you want those priorities to be. So that way the person walking in the door has an understanding of, okay, so this is what I need to be working on. It all just flows then into the expectation setting, the review, and everything that's to come later. So that job description and getting that right up front is really.
Beth?
I would agree. I think it's very critical to get that job description absolutely right. And as a part of that, I would like to get feedback from Bill and Eric on that job description. So I'd like to have them help in providing that input, if that would be appropriate, because I think that having the direct report is going to be really important for us in the commission, because we're so, you know, far away from the day-to-day operation, that I think that kind of feedback would be really important. I also just want to say, well, I've got the mic here, as a former owner of a professional staffing business, I 100% support going outside for recruiting and getting a professional. You can get a broader perspective, you look more widely, and they bring a lot of expertise into the process. So I really think that's really good. I'd also, at some point, like to have a conversation with the commission about how the commission is going to interact with this firm. You know, be it the subcommittee and the whole commission, and what, you know, people's expectations are about working with that. Because I think that's going to be important as we identify a company.
Greg and then Ken?
So this is Commissioner Freeze, I agree, both. I think, Sarah, you were the one who was suggesting potentially we need to flip 2 and 1, and I would agree. I feel like that is the first step, and I would add Beth's comment, and I would say I think we should talk to all the directors, not just Eric and Bill. No offense, Eric and Bill, if you're in the room. So that's it. So thank you.
I think RFP is a good idea. Recruiter and search firm's a good idea. I would suggest a 3-member subcommittee from the commission, just as a suggestion to throw out there. I think some feedback from the district in the process, during the process, from Bill and Eric, a very good idea too. And finding some way to get some feedback from our customer communities, Tom's point, I think, is a good idea also. I'll probably make an informal suggestion that Beth be on the 3-member subcommittee, but if she was here to hear that, you know.
Okay, Sarah?
Thank you. I agree with everything that everyone has shared so far. Also, on the kind of how do we put together and how do we interact back, I'm having been on the subcommittees before, I think it is really important, to Beth's point, that we figure out how we're going to interact with the search firm, but also how and when we're going to interact with the commission as a whole, because I would hate for us to go through a whole process and not have regular check-ins with the broader commission so everyone's aligned. The other piece that Bill should get credit for saying was that we can obviously, or we can definitely, I would assume, work with the search firm to bring in different commissioners at different times in the process as well, right? Maybe there's a subcommittee that reviews resumes, maybe there's a subcommittee that does interviews, maybe there's a subcommittee that is working on getting this feedback from our customer, community, owner, other people's perspectives, right? It could be different iterations of us in a subcommittee throughout this process, perhaps, to bring in more voices if people want to participate in different, parts of this. But I do think, at least early feedback, it would be helpful, from my perspective, if we could lean on, you know, HR here and Mike to help us really flesh out a timeline for this, those checkpoints back with the broader commission, to the subcommittee, and knowing that we are going to hire a search firm, because I totally agree, having worked with them in the past, it's super important. And if we don't set those expectations on the front end of what that looks like from our perspective, I think we could get ourselves in trouble, which then leads me to, you know, when we start to do that, I think we'll see that this is a big project, and what's the kind of ongoing plan for operations and transition within the district as well. Like, that's another piece that we haven't quite articulated here, right? Michael's got a bunch of work to do, I'm sure, to help put together transition planning information. What's the ongoing continuity going to look like here at the district? We have super capable people who can make sure that things are running, but how do we make sure that that authority is clearly delegated? All of those sorts of pieces, I think we need to make sure we're looking at as well. The other big picture pieces of feedback, sorry, I've got a lot, you had in related activities, I think it's super helpful, this review of policy governance. I guess my caveat, and this is going to get into our next agenda item, so we can talk about it there too, is perhaps we just focus on, at least for now, the executive limitations sections of our policies, because biting off all of that at this moment seems like way too much. And yet, completely agree that we need to clarify the evaluation process for the executive director and get that and the new structures and things into our policies. So maybe we just make sure that we're scoping that appropriately to what's actually manageable. And then, last for now, I think, on the kind of what would the pay scale, right? We talked, you have it in here somewhere about compensation. We're doing a pay study right now, so I was just curious, you know, Michael, if we will have feedback from that could be an input into our process kind of in time.
Mike can embellish on this, but we plan to have results of the pay survey by June.
All right, so perhaps maybe there might be maybe opportunity to work with them to see if that particular position could be expedited in the process, or at least give us some range ideas for putting in a...
We may have some access to, not specifically our data, but other data prior to that. I know I'm filling out a salary survey right now that the same firm that we're using is doing for Green Bay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
there's a possibility that we might have some data.
Pull in some
at least with
resources.
that position. But I also think, you know, the other piece is, you know, looking at that position and seeing if it's scored correctly and what range that goes into, because again, you know, that's the internal piece that helps and look at the market piece as well. So
Good point.
looking at both those together is going to be important.
Yeah, good point. Okay, thank you.
I want to make sure everyone understood what Mike said, because this has confused staff over and over again. What we're doing by the end of June, looking at the overall market and adjusting our entire pay scale to match that. It is a different task than reviewing individual jobs or how they are scored and how they fit in the pay structure. We're not doing that right now. But writing the job description, having it scored by our compensation consultant would accomplish that. They're different things.
Okay, Tom?
All right, two things. First thing is, and this may go without saying, but we certainly have to have somebody from personnel with Stafford involved right away, whether that's beside Paul or with Paul, however. But I think that's going to be important when we're going through this whole process. whether it's because the contract's gonna need to be written, or because, you know, there's some concerns with old people like me asking questions, or what it might be. You know, I think that becomes real important for us. So we're not only gonna have this, you know, employment consultant, but I think we need to have legal assistance along the way that's on top of us, in the opinion. Not that I, you know, would think that because I'm an attorney, it just seems to make sense to me. Paul, you can take me out to lunch later. These last two things are related activities, and, you know, I don't know why I'm like this, but, I am sometimes. So, executive director performance review process, and this review of policy government, is there any reason to not wait until we got somebody in place to continue with that?
Well,
I know they're related, but it's like,
yeah.
isn't that, or wouldn't we be somewhat helped by whoever is gonna be the executive director and putting those together, and just like push pause and?
Yeah, well, I thought about that, and, in a conversation I had with Michael, he mentioned that a lot of the executive expectations are in policy governance. They're that part of that executive limitations. And so my thinking was that a person that's being hired, if you don't have maybe we move the expectations to the job description, then that could settle it. But then you have to rectify the expectations in the job description with the policy governance ones. So you know, maybe that's the decision the subcommittee is gonna decide to do, but because so many of the expectations are in policy governance, it seemed to me that in conversation with Michael, that was important. And
So at least those things can work together.
Yeah, exactly.
Just,
And then
the person to my left was talking.
I don't disagree with Sarah
You
that.
better not.
That we could limit it to, I just kept it broad at this point, but I don't disagree with her that we could limit the committee at this point to the executive expectations and limitations or whatever. And then take the rest from there, maybe when we do have the new executive director. I just wanted to keep it broad for our discussion, because maybe there's others that had different ideas. So, Brad, you have a comment?
Yes. I like the idea of, limiting the review of policy governance document to the executive limitations policies. And, I mean, I think it's just a matter of making sure that, the executive limitation policies and the job description align, and just updated the job description. So, I think we just need to make sure that the job description refers to the executive limitation policies. And just leave it, you know, don't open it up any more broadly than that. I think, asking staff for their take on, district priorities and the needs of the district moving forward, looking at our work program, our plans, a strategic plan, and bringing that review and, their kind of take on that to the commission for our review, be probably the most efficient way for us to accomplish that part of the process. And, using one or more committees seems to make a lot of sense, to work through the development of the RFP, the hiring of the consultant, review of the candidates, written applications, as well as doing the interviews. Seems like maybe more than one subcommittee might be an efficient way to divide the workload.
Ken?
Tom, does it make sense to have human resources put together an action plan with timelines for fill position? The reason I say that is because of everything talked about today. I don't think if we're still talking about this in December, you know, we've probably.
I think Mike, would you be willing to do that? Work together to put together a timeline?
As long as I'm working with someone on the commission to do it, absolutely, yeah. Just want to make sure that, I mean, I could put together a timeline and then bring it back to you all and be like, yeah, that's not gonna.
Or somebody else volunteer to do it. Ezra?
Oops. First thing the subcommittee rolls up sleeves and does with Mike is this. I mean, in my mind, that just follows. Yeah, lay it out. We can touch points with the commission, touch points with the committee, how that all works, where HR fits in, who comes first, one comes second, the way we talk about, I mean, I think all the pieces we've laid out today fit right in, but, that sounds like not all on Mike alone, but this committee, or commission subcommittee with Mike.
Okay, so, Sarah?
Sorry, another piece of feedback. I think that, I just want to make sure I was understanding, Brad, what you were saying correctly, and I think it's so important that we take the opportunity, excuse me, to make sure that we have gotten feedback into whether it gets fully reflected in the job description or just in the recruitment information. Like, having worked with search firms previously, and Beth can correct me if I'm wrong here, but they're going to want to know all of that information about where we are as a district, what are the priorities, what is the evaluation supposed to look like for this, what do staff need from, what do owner communities need? And so even if, we did just look at the job description, we didn't look at it with all of that feedback in mind, let alone, staff feedback, owner community feedback. Frankly, too much of our feedback is kind of like, yeah, this makes sense because this is what you're doing, but this is our opportunity to make sure that we are updating that. And so I hope that we can take the time to make sure that we get all of that before we just rush into a search.
Just a couple thoughts on that. I think that we don't want to delay the start of the search, though, because it is going to take some time to find the right candidate. So I think giving them some information to get started would be a good way to go, and then we can always add to it and refine as we go along the search, because it's kind of like sifting through sand. We're going to be sifting through, they're going to be sifting through quite a number of candidates and then narrowing it down. And I'd like them to at least get a start as soon as possible so that we can, start that process and then, keep refining it as we go along. But yes.
And they might have great feedback on what information we need to gather as well.
Exactly.
So that makes sense to
working
me.
with them to,
Yeah.
See what they need to start with this.
That makes sense.
Okay, so I have a question for the commission. In regard to the search firm, do we want to hire the search firm and then have them help gather the information from the staff and our customer communities? Or have the commission do that as we're hiring a search firm?
I would kind of like to hire them and have the commission get the feedback. And then, as we go through the process, they may want to touch bases with some of them, but I wouldn't turn it over to them entirely.
So hire this, do we have general agreement on that? Hire the search firm and they would assist us with commission getting the input from the customer communities, but what about the staff in terms of, like, what's been mentioned, the 7 direct report, or that were the direct reports. Somebody mentioned the 2, and then it got broadened to the 7. And then I was also thinking other randomly selected people from various areas. So I would think I would want the firm to do that, not the commission.
I would agree with that.
Okay,
Yeah,
but the commission would do the customer communities.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I think that we would want to help direct the firm to kind of help them decide the direction. In other words, how to start. So start with a couple of the current direct reports and then go on from there. So I think we could help them with that direction to help them kind of, get started and get going. But I do think that, yeah.
Okay, Sarah?
I agree with Beth that they're two separate but related work streams of a search firm, because their expertise is sourcing high-quality candidates based on what we're looking for. The second piece is, what are we looking for, right? And that's our job. And I think we are all, at least I can speak for myself, it scares me to think that that's our job in some ways, because that's a huge job, right? And we are only, we're commissioners, right? We're not staff. And so thinking out loud here, maybe that's a separate, maybe that's like a BJ Rogers helps staff us on that process of gathering input from staff, owner communities, to update the job description, to make sure that the executive limitations are aligned with that job description, that the performance review I mean, he was already helping us with the performance review process. He knows the team to a degree that a search firm isn't gonna know, nor is it, again, their expertise necessarily. But I hear and I feel in myself a little bit of the, how are we gonna do that ourselves? Also, I'm sure Mike can help to some degree, but as he said, he's got a job to do as well, right? A day-to-day job. And so we can't just like decide we're gonna upend him. That's not our job. We need to ask Michael at least first. But maybe there's a bit of a hybrid approach of making sure that we have support in doing both of those things that are gonna be important for us to do.
I like that suggestion, but I'm a little bit cautious about that as well, because I think too many fingers in the pot can kind of make it, so I'd like to get Mike's feedback on how he would interact with BJ, if we were to go that route, because I want to make sure that we are doing this in a very efficient manner and not getting too muddled up with a lot of input and such. So would put you on the spot, I know.
I'll turn it over to Bill.
Sorry, I'm thinking about this from a management point of view here, how to manage a project. I think you are looking to buy 3 services. One of them is just pure time, do the work to compile things. Another is a conduit to sources of information, to staff, to communities. And a third is your own thinking about what things should be. You can't outsource the last one. We already have conduits to staff and communities, which you could tap into if you wanted to. Our communications program has it. We have an organizational development specialist who knows how to survey staff, which leaves the how much time will this be? I guess why I'm jumping in here is, if you're thinking of bringing in a consultant, you should be clear what you're asking them to do for you. We don't, like, just to repeat, like, I don't think we need BJ's help getting input from communities or staff. I don't know what role we'd have. So there, I've given you something maybe to work with, Mike, if you want to add to that, because you know more about this.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the feedback piece, saying focus groups, hour session, you know, very specific questions. I mean, it wouldn't be a huge time commitment, and as Bill mentioned, we do have an organizational development specialist on staff who could facilitate some of those working groups and whatnot. So we can gather that information. I guess the key thing is, from the commission, what is it you want out of those groups, so that we can make sure we're asking the right questions and getting the feedback that is going to be useful for you in crafting that job description.
It just seems to me that we need to put together this subcommittee and get started on this.
So I'm kind of hearing different things, and I was coming to the same conclusion. I think that what we need is a subcommittee, and then there could be a couple tracks going on at the same time. So you could be gathering input or assigning work to other members of the commission could assign it to other subcommittees or members individually to obtain some of the information, meet with at cross-section or focus groups or whatever we have of staff and the owner communities. I know, for example, the cities and villages, they have kind of quarterly meetings. So we might be able to, you know, some of us could tap into them, and somebody could tap into Madison and Tom at the towns. But that's just one way we could go. So I'm thinking, so the other so you have the process with obtaining the information, really, which my thought was number 2, which may move to number 1, is formulate the priorities the district needs. What is it that the district needs now, and to get their input as to what that is, and that might help form our commission, and we'd have the commission would then sit down and go through that information and come up with its own priorities and needs that we would then pass off to the consultant or work into the job description or something. And so I can see that track going, and then the second track is the formulation of the RFP going on and getting that out at the same time that we're doing first task, right? And that, and then help with the job description would also come after we hire the consultant. They would help us with the job description and help us, or we could, the subcommittee could say, no, let's use BJ for that, you know, and with the executive limitations, but they could help decide that. Does that make sense? We have the 2 tracks going on, that they would work on formulating the RFP, and then also do kind of that first set of what I call the priorities and needs. And that we would then gather that information, go through it ourselves, and then present that to the consultant, or maybe even work into the RFP, depending on where the station of the RFP is in relation to us getting that work complete. Does that make sense? Any more comments? Oh, Paul.
Just really more of a footnote, not so much for substance, but process. As most of you know, we have a subcommittee that's subject to open meetings and open records. So if we have multiple subcommittees, it's going to, you know, require that staff be sending out notices and doing all of the things that need to be done by that.
Yep. And so that brings up my other, do we have our communications team or somebody from HR staff or subcommittee? Because there's going to be a lot of minutes and notes and everything, and so I don't know, I guess I would leave it to Bill, Michael and Mike to talk about as to who could be our staff or staff members to our subcommittee and to the commission on this process, because there'll be a lot more open meetings, minutes, just all that logistic stuff that just sucks up a lot of time, and then to help, you know, advise and things like that. So you guys can think about that, and then maybe report back at the next meeting. And then who would like to serve on this subcommittee? It's a big charge, and so if you think that the work is getting too big, we could break it into another group to do some of the other tasks. For example, maybe one subcommittee handles the outreach and the other works on the RFP. Maybe that's, I don't know if that's the best way to set it up right now or not, but there's going to have to be obviously communication between the two. Or do we just go with the one subcommittee right now, and then they can report back and say, hey, I think we can handle it, or let's pass this off to 3 other members or something. Tom?
I am not volunteering, but I know a couple people that are. I really liked Ken's idea about maybe this first group. Can't we have something in, you know, in writing, this wonderful thing that you did with timelines and things like that? Isn't that what you were talking about, to help us walk through this process?
That's my suggestion, so we stay on track, number 1, but also Paul has something as we go.
Well, I had heard the suggestion that the subcommittee would work on that. And
That's
so
the
that would
first
probably be
thing.
their first task. I'm sorry, I missed that, but you're right, that I think it was Ezra that suggested maybe the subcommittee would work on that as their task. So they'd be tasked with coming up with a timeline, coming up with the process or how we obtain the priorities and needs, and then doing the RFP. And then at that point, we discuss with, we make the selection of the firm, and then things kind of get turned over to them with, and have it, we can decide later who would be the touch point firm. So does that kind of make sense? Sarah?
Sorry, I'm being unfair to Bill because he has the unfortunate honor of sitting next to me. I think there are two additional questions that I'm curious about from a staff perspective that's maybe a Michael, Mike, and Bill managing, kind of just from Bill's perspective, managing the internal staff team side of day-to-day, which is, I think we definitely need staffing support of the subcommittee. Do we also, or what, is there also a role for, like, content expertise participation in this process from the staff team? Not that staff are in charge of hiring, you know, it is our responsibility to figure this out and hire this person, and yet there are things that we just don't know. Like the fact that Bill was able to say, we could use our organizational specialist to help gather this feedback. I wouldn't have thought of that, right? But that's a really important and helpful content suggestion. So I don't think I would have thought of that.
Well, I think,
Right, is it an ex officio role, or what would it be that could help us with some of that content help? Maybe, you know, it's just, Mike, you can do that in your expertise role or whatever, but I would love for you all to think about that and help us think about both the administrative support that we're gonna need and the content support that we're gonna need from staff.
yeah, and I think that our directors, too, Michael, and then I would call them the sub-directors, all should know this is probably the most important decision the commission will be making this year, hopefully this year, and that we may be leaning on them for more expertise, such as the organizational type of thing, and processes and their inputs valued as to our best methods to obtain some of the information that we're desiring. So I think, given that, I think it's only fair to say, speaking for the commission, going kind of out of step here, that it's desired by the commission to have the staff support needed and when we need it, be provided. And that we're open to suggestions from staff as well in terms of some of the meeting the priorities and needs and forming the RFP. Does everybody understand that?
I just add something to that?
Yeah.
A question is could we have one of the members on that subcommittee? So would it be appropriate for one of them to be a part of that subcommittee?
Well,
What subcommittee are we talking about now?
I think the first one, aren't
The
we?
first one.
The
Yeah.
first,
Oh, well, I agree. I was assuming that, that subcommittee would have the, support of staff.
I don't think it's appropriate to have a member on the subcommittee of
Not
staff,
on the
but
committee.
there should be support staff. And that's what I was asking earlier, who is the support staff? And there may be varied members. Someone was gonna have to staff it through the logistics, but then there may be varied members of staff coming in and out as the process develops, right? So we may have, Mike Lipsky for a while, then Bill Walker might be there, and then there's the other guy that's kind of into organization, I don't know his name. But they may be involved, so, Bill.
This is fun to watch. I'm gonna put my management hat on again and make another suggestion. Sorry, I apologize for the snarkiness. It actually is fun to watch people form teams. We're launching a project here which has two components, commission component, staff component. We've identified many of the key things required for success of a project, timeline, objectives, et cetera. We're missing one, because every successful project has one and maybe two project managers. Job is to run the team. And this conversation about who should be involved, that should be a project manager discussion. So my suggestion here is that we leave with real clarity about who are the co-PMs. Who's the commission PM, who's the staff PM, and let them and the subcommittee sort of move you forward.
I just want to throw out there, like what you're saying, Tom, there's staff involvement from HR, from all the ways we've talked about engaging folks to help us with needs identification. I just can't help thinking about the possibility, Bill, Eric, other director level folks might be candidates in the process here, and so we do have to be a little bit mindful about that. That's out there. It's always a possibility in these types of processes. So for me, that's probably a reason why you don't put Bill or Eric or somebody from staff on a subcommittee with the commission, because there's just that gets messy, or it eliminates the possibility that somebody might want to be a candidate, whichever way that cuts. So just surfacing that reality that we need to be thinking about.
I'm gonna say this. You're the project manager for the commission. I mean, well, two reasons. One, because you're El Presidente. And number two, I think you've already taken that on. So, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind here that you're sort of the project manager. I'm hoping that's okay, but, you know.
So,
And you'd be very good at it.
well, I would agree with that, and I only had one more thing to say, and it was to reinforce, what Ken and Tom said, which, asking staff to come back, to the next meeting with, kind of a fully flushed out action plan, to the extent that that's possible by the next meeting. I don't know if the rest of the commission, agrees with that, but, based on all the discussion we've had today, maybe staff could take that and take their best shot at, trying to put together something that makes sense with, actionable items and a timeline.
Anybody else? So I think what we'll do, so we're kind of switching the timeline. This might be more of a draft timeline, what Brad's suggesting, and then that will get refined by the subcommittee, as the subcommittees gets moving. But ask staff to come back with who will be the project manager from staff, basically the lead staff member for subcommittee. And then we want to wait until that point in time at the next meeting to choose the subcommittee, or to choose that time. So we'll do it today. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So so the timeline, they'll come back with a timeline, or draft timeline, and who the staff, the subcommittee will be. And then who desires to serve on this subcommittee?
I'd love to join Beth and Sarah on this subcommittee. Right? We're rethinking the same thing, and Tom, of course, would be a part of that too. I mean, that would, yeah, be esteemed, level compatriots on the group. Thank you. That's
Not
four.
sure if I'm accepting my
Tom,
handshake
if
yet.
If we include you, that's 4. Does that work as a number out of the 9 and all the other things we need to think about mathematically?
Any point with over 2, you have to notice and everything.
Anything
So
anyway.
when you have 3, it doesn't matter if you have 3, 4, 5. Right, that's true.
I don't think
So
there's a
we have to
magic
keep
number.
it below 4.
I don't think
4 or
there's a
below.
4 or
magic
below.
number on that one.
Sarah?
I have a question, and, I think I'm willing to serve, on the subcommittee, knowing that I'd like to help put together the plan, right, from a project plan perspective that would have regular inputs and, participation of other members of the commission. And I want to make sure that when we're putting together action items for today, we're clear, because I think I heard from Mike that it would be very helpful when when staff's putting together this timeline of next steps for us, that they have a point of contact, and whether that just simply be that you're continuing to do that, Tom, I think that would be great. Because I worry that if we go too much into this is already a subcommittee thing, it'll really go too slow. but I do think it's important, I'm hearing it's important that they be able to collaborate with at least you, if you're willing to continue to kind of keep leading us.
Yeah, I
Because
can-
it's helpful.
I can try to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Janelle, you had a question?
I do. So years ago, when you formed the subcommittee of the commission, it was specifically for the chief engineer and director's performance review. So do you have to take a vote today to form this subcommittee for the selection of the executive director?
We will be, right?
Okay.
But I want to see if Beth is willing to serve on it. Okay, so we'd have, okay, so it'd be, Tom, Beth, Sarah, and Ezra. That, Tom Havel, Tom H., Beth, Sarah, and Ezra. Do we have a motion to approve the subcommittee for the executive director search process?
I move approval of that subcommittee before Brad can have a conversation about something else.
Motion by Commissioner Wilson, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Clark. Brad? Yeah. Yeah, he managed many projects for Madison, he can. Yeah, it is. A committee meeting, or commission meeting. Okay, so, any further discussion? Okay, so the subcommittee we'll hear from, at the next meeting, who the staff member will be, and then the subcommittee will get busy working, unless you can do something before the next meeting. You could get in touch with me, and then I could, then we could have the staff member contact and, see who from the subcommittee could arrange a meeting. Not necessarily waiting to the next meeting, I guess, since time is of the essence. Yeah, Tom?
I could see us checking in with Janelle right now before we leave this room and getting notice stuff lined up for our first meeting, which would get us maybe somewhere with Mike before the next time the commission meets.
I'm sorry that I attempted to cut you off, but you do need to vote.
I just want to point out that Commissioner Rummel is on the meeting as well.
Sorry. Marcia, do you have anything you want to add? Or would you like to be on the committee? And then somebody...
I'm willing to serve, but I would be like learning from all of you with your more experience, but I think it would be really interesting.
Would it be possible just for the subcommittee agendas to be sent out to the full commission, and for all of the notices to indicate that a quorum of the commission may be present at any of the meetings? And then all the members, if they would like to attend a meeting, could do that. Make sense?
Does that make sense, Marcia? That we would send
I
out
would
the...
definitely be happy to try to attend some of the meetings.
Okay. Okay, so we'll make note of that. That's not an uncommon thing in agendas nowadays. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we'll try to do is get moving on this, maybe even before the next commission meeting, depending on when staff, I don't want to, I want them to have time to think about who's going to have the capability and time to be able to devote to this. So, we have a motion and a second to approve the subcommittee. Can, Tom, you have a...
Just one more thing, because Janelle was looking like deer in headlights for a second there. There is language about posting this as a committee meeting, and then additional language, which Paul can help you with, saying that members of a quorum of this group may appear, but they're not taking action as this group. And that'll be very helpful.
Right. We've used that language with the Yahara Wind Subcommittee.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Tom, for clarifying that. We have a motion and a second to approve the subcommittee. Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None, motion carries. Okay. Thank you. That takes us to item 4B, which is the governance training review timing. And we had brought this up at our last meeting, given Michael's retirement, if it's best to wait on the training, given our time will be committed to the executive director search. So I think Michael had
Yes, I
you
laid
had
out,
3 options or 2
yeah,
options?
2 options. The third option would be continue as planned, but option 1 would be just to delay this work till later in the year. And that would be, it's not a material change in the contract. The second would be to terminate the services, given where we are, because we don't know what the future's gonna hold. And then put out either another RFP or approach it with a fresh perspective at some point in the future. Since the work has really not even started yet, there'd be minimal transition costs. Both those 2 options work, as well as continuing with the next 4 weeks, next 4 meetings of having study sessions.
What's the commission's pleasure, Beth, and then Brad?
I think that we definitely should delay it, because we have a lot of work ahead of us. But I think it's important work for the commission. And I think that, to not do it would not serve us well either. So I'd like to delay it until toward the end of the year and pick that up later. And maybe the commission can discuss, maybe after the new director is hired, the timing for that and when we would, do that. But I think delaying it is something that I would,
That's sort of what I had in mind.
I'll move to do that, to delay it until.
I'll second it. Aye.
Michael, you have an update?
I do. I have one update. I was in Washington D.C. yesterday for staff visits with Baldwin's office, Pocan's office, and Johnson's office. And the 2 items on my agenda was talking about the designation of PFAS and PFOA and PFAS as a hazardous substance contaminant under federal regulations, the Superfund regulations. And the implications of that are that we could be held liable if it is determined that there's PFAS concentrations in any of our projects, dewatering projects, our site across the street, our pond areas. So there is a Senate Bill 1430 that would limit wastewater and water plants' liability to CERCLA designations, and that is out there. It's a Republican-led bill. When I met with the representatives, it seems like right now, given with what's happening with the presidential race and several Senate and congressional seats up for reelection, and that there's such a slim margin, both House and the Senate. It's uncertain whether this will be moving forward, and the Democrats are not inclined to support it since it's Republican-led. So it's uncertain. I didn't walk away from my meetings with a strong sense on whether that PFAS Liability Protection Act will actually get approved this year, but we could be surprised. Second item was around the state revolving fund, and that, as you know, Bill has been giving you updates on what's been happening with the availability of state revolving fund money for our projects, and the limit, because there's so many applications for funding, and it's outstripping our need. The other challenge with that is that there are congressional direction of funds or earmarks that take money off the top from the federal level that go to states, and which makes there even less money available for our state revolving fund, our clean water fund, in the area of about $18 million. Now, these earmarks are allocated by state on a proportional basis, and 50% of these earmarks go to the Republican and 50% to the Democrats. Republicans typically do not apply for these earmarks because it's more government, and the Democrats they don't like applying for the earmarks, but they feel like they have to bring the money home. So there's a situation right now where both sides are stuck on not liking the earmarks, and there doesn't seem to be a solution in the future. Although the long-term solution would be lifting the caps and allowing more funding in the first place, or the earmarks would come out of new funding, not out of existing funding. So that is what I learned in the meetings this week. Any questions?
Yeah, DC at its finest, right? I'm curious, Michael, so we know that the Clean Water Fund this year is overspent already. It sounds like this is gonna make that even worse going forward, but this wasn't the case, like, this wasn't the problem we were currently dealing with. This is an additional potential burden on the Clean Water Fund? Okay. Great.
That's all I have for my
Okay.
report.
Thanks, Michael. Regulatory and legal, Paul?
Yes, a couple of things. I think Vanessa reported last time that the Saltwise bill was vetoed by the governor. So I suspect that will come back next session, but we'll see. And infiltration and inflow eligibility for Clean Water Fund did pass and was signed. You probably saw in the paper, and it's no surprise that the governor vetoed the PFAS bill, so the funding associated with that not going forward. I mean, the governor asked, there's a process known as 1310 process with joint finance to authorize the funding, not as a separate piece, because in the budget, the chances of that going anywhere are, in my opinion, pretty close to zero. So that's off for now. The legislature is now done, better or for worse, until next spring. So have a little reprieve, I think. You probably also saw in the paper that the Biden administration just released its PFAS standards. These are standards these are maximum contaminant levels for drinking water, not wastewater standards or biosolid standards. There will be repercussions, I think, in part because some of the state standards were driven by assumptions about a federal standard being 20 parts per trillion. The new standards are 4 parts per trillion PFOS and PFOA, and 10 parts per trillion for 3 other compounds. What the ripple effects of that will be for us is to be seen. I personally don't think it's likely to have significant impact, but it's really to tell, and obviously, you know, Marty's team has been following that very closely and will, continue, to do that as well. And a couple of other, DNR is back on its disinfection guidance document, and,
Thank you, Paul. That will take us to future meeting schedule. It's in the packet for and I just wanted to make a comment. I'm thinking that we may be wanting to have more in-person meetings as we go through our executive director search process. I think it would be better for the commission to be gathered together in a room like this when the subcommittee's making reports out. Because everybody, I see a lot of heads. I think it's a lot easier to manage a group than on Zoom, and we can have better, more face-to-face time and discussion that way. So, just a heads up, people, I think we're gonna be having a lot more in-person meetings, coming up as we move through our executive director search. Okay, any future agenda topics? Sarah?
So Tom, just to clarify, we're probably swapping these commission governance study sessions for executive director search, essentially, on the agenda. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. I move we adjourn.
Second.
Aye. Yay.
Yeah, I'm not concerned. You know, once you all